Welcome back to Mage Knight on the Dragon Table. In the first video of this series, I went over how I store this game so that everyone could see it, and then I went over the setup for a two-player cooperative full conquest game. In this second video, I'm going to go a little bit into some of the details of how you play the game. One thing I didn't mention during setup is that there are a couple of pieces that get removed from the game when you're playing co-op. There's one skill per player that gets removed. The skill has a black, helmet looking thing on it, and that is a player versus player skill that gets removed when you're playing co-op. And there are 3 spells that are player versus player spells, and they get removed from the game. Otherwise, it's all the same whether you're playing co-op or competitive. There are turn order tokens that come with the game, one for each character, but I'm usually playing a game with 2 people, and if you can't keep track of whose turn it is in a 2-player game, then this game is not for you. Simple way to say it. The first thing you have to choose is who's going to choose a tactic card first. And in order to do this, what I usually do is I just put 2 of these little shield symbols in my hand and have somebody not looking randomly draw and say, okay, Arithia. Arithia gets to choose first in the tactics cards. But first, you need to draw your hand up. So each player gets a hand of 5 cards that they will be able to play from that turn. And then Arithia is going to get first glance at the tactics card and get to choose which one she wants to play with. So I'm going to zoom in for some of this detail work. So these are the daytime tactic cards that Arithia and Tovak get to choose from. The first one just means that you get to be the first player. The second card, Rethink, allows you to discard up to 3 cards from your starting hand, and then draw 3 additional cards to replace them. And then you shuffle your discard pile back into your deck. So that's another one at the beginning. That's not a bad one if you've gotten a bad starting hand. That's a good one for that. Mana Steel is the third one. It allows you to take one of the die from the source. Not that one. I've not rolled the dice for the source yet, but it would allow you to take a die from the source, place it on this card, and then at some point during the round, you could use this die in addition to any other sources of mana that you've managed to get a hold of. And the other player then doesn't have access to this die during the round. It then gets returned to the source at the end of the round, or once it gets played. Planning is the 4th. At the end of each turn, if you have at least 2 cards in your hand before you draw as if your hand limit is 1 higher. Meaning, as long as you end with at least 2 cards in your hand, you draw up to 6 cards instead of back up to 5 cards. This can be advantageous. There are going to be plenty of turns when you use all of your cards. There are going to be some turns when you don't use all of your cards. This is generally a better card for a later round, just because you're more likely to have more cards in your hand in a later round. If you're a higher level, you can have 6 cards in your hand, and therefore more likely to have leftover cards at the end of your turn, which would allow you to increase the number of cards you draw. And if your base is 6, that means you would be drawing 7 cards. The Great Start tactic is always a popular choice. It's a 5, which means you'd be starting, you would probably not be the first player to start with, but you would get to draw 2 cards to start with, which can give you a big advantage to your hand. And the right moment, once during this round, you can announce that you're immediately going to take another turn. So once your turn's over, you can immediately take another one. You can do that right away, right after your first turn, or you can save it for some other opportune moment. But those are the tactics cards. So Arythea has to choose a tactic card. And usually you're going to look at your hand first because, for instance, Rethink, whether or not you pick Rethink depends on the hand that's been dealt to you. So I just looked at Arythea's hand, and she's got a buttload of move, so I don't have to really worry about doing a Rethink with her. I will probably do Early Bird with Arythea. And then Tovok would get to choose. Let's see what he has. Let me roll the mana dice while I'm thinking about it. And if you ever roll mana dice, half of which are black or half of which are wild, the gold dice, you re-roll. Okay. So the black can't be used during the day. And I think that Tovok is actually going to take the Rethink card. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to put these cards that we didn't use over here. So Arythea's benefit is that she gets to be the first player this round. And Tovok is doing Rethink. The reason why is because he's got attack, he's got heal, which is not going to do him any good. He's got one move card, but it's also a ranged attack card. Attack and a mana draw. This really isn't a great hand because the first thing you have to be able to do in this game when you come out of the portal is move. Now, any one of these cards can be used sideways for one move. It can be used sideways for one move, one attack, one block, or one influence. However, you don't want to be wasting cards just to move when you have the chance to possibly do better. So I'm going to pick 3 cards that maybe are not as advantageous to have right at the beginning. And he'll draw 3 new ones. And I got a couple move cards, so that's good. But now we know the starting order. Arythea chose Early Bird, and Tovok chose Rethink, which is the number 2. So Arythea will go first, and Tovok will go second. And these used tactic cards, I'm just going to put underneath the pile of tactic cards. Because I can remember that Arythea goes first. And she's going to start on the portal. And the first thing she's going to be wanting to do is move. There's no reason to sit on the portal. It gives you no advantage, and it is going to prevent the next Mage Knight from coming through. In a game like this, there's just absolutely no reason to do it. These Mage Knights, although they are in this land on similar purpose, they don't particularly like one another. They were sent here separately by the council to get a job done. So they're basically like people who work together, and they understand that they have a job to do, but it's really, they really don't get along that well. They get along just well enough not to fight against each other in this particular game. But in a lot of the games, there is player versus player, and there is some competitiveness. But they're basically like 2 people who work together and just don't like each other that much. Tovok, I'm gonna need you to get me those TPS reports tomorrow. Take my stapler. As I was saying, Arythea gets to go first. And she's going to be wanting to move either probably here or here and then explore. These spaces during the daytime and during the nighttime are meadow spaces that cost 2 to move into. This is forest. Forest costs 3 during the daytime and 5 at nighttime. And these values are all on the board, the day-night board, right here. So you don't have to look them back up in the rule book. So let's look at the cards that she has. She has Swiftness. She's got Battle Versatility, which she won't need on this turn, not yet anyways. She does have this as move, she has this as move, and she's also got improvisation, which allows movement as well. Battle Versatility is the card that is specific to Erythia. All the rest of the cards are the same for all of the Mage Knights. But each Mage Knight has one card that is theirs alone, and this is for hers. So what she's going to do is is probably going to, let's see. She's going to use mana from the source, so she's going to take one of the die. You can do this once per turn. And she's going to put it on this card, which will make it, instead of a move 2, it'll make it a move 4, because she's using mana in order to use the more advanced part of the card. So the first 2 that she moves is going to be onto this space, and the next 2 is going to be to flip over a hex, because it costs 2 movement points to flip over a hex. Now these hexes can't be oriented just anyway. They have to be oriented so that they match the tile that they're being placed up against. So this is where the A is. So here there's a 1. And let's see, there's a piece of a star. So this one needs to go here. Now, if she wanted to move onto that tile, it would take additional movement, which she does have in her hand. But the first thing that we need to do is we're going to pull out a random monster, because there is a blade laying in the forest, so there's a marauding orc. So I'm randomly pulling an orc. Oh, and he's kind of an ugly one, too. There's all sorts of iconography in this game, and it is actually covered in the rulebook. The one thing that's not covered in the rulebook as well, if at all, are some of the location sites that you come to. For instance, here, this village or this glade. The rules for those sites are listed on these cards, which are not only separate from the rulebook, but are also two-sided. So when you're looking up a rule for one of the sites, you have to flip through 2 sides. Oh, there's a magical blade. So you have to, it's just kind of awkward. I understand why they did it, because it seems like it would make it easier to reference these cards instead of having to pull the rulebook out. Personally, I would prefer if the rulebook had 1 page in here that just had all the sites on it. I just have this thing that if you have something that has the words rulebook on it, that it should be a comprehensive book with all of the rules that you need in order to play a game. This is just personal preference. So let's look at what else is on this tile. So for one thing, there's a village. And when you're at a village, you can recruit units that have the village icon on them, which is this little house. All of these units, there are 2 foresters here and an herbalist, all of these could be recruited for the value shown at the top left corner of the card. The foresters take 5 influence to recruit, the herbalists take 3 influence to recruit. You can also heal in a village. You can buy 1 point of healing for 3 influence. That lets you get rid of a wound card that's in your hand. You can also plunder a village during another player's turn. You can only plunder a village once between each of your turns. If you do, you draw 2 cards, that's the result of the plundering, and you get a reputation of -1, because the villagers are not happy with you. The magical glade, that's right here, if you end your turn on a magical glade, you can throw away a wound card from your hand or your discard pile. It's not the same as healing in a village. If you heal in a village, you could also heal a unit. You cannot heal a unit on a magical blade. If you start your turn on a magical blade during the day, you get a gold mana token. And you can have this for that turn. And it has to be used during that turn, and then it will go away. Gold mana is considered unstable and can only exist in token form, not in crystallized form. So that means you can't ever store gold mana on your card. If it's during the nighttime, you get a black mana. Same thing, black mana is also unstable. It cannot be stored on your card. And black mana is mostly used with spells. And then there's this lovely baddie guy. He has armor of 3, and he's also got this physical resistance symbol right next to the 3. That means that he actually can resist twice as much as his armor says. So he actually can resist 6, unless you have a fire or ice attack. This is resistance against a physical attack. He has an attack of 4, but it is brutal, which means if it goes through, you actually get hit with 8 instead of 4. And he has a fame of 4, so if you kill him, you get 4 points. So he's actually kind of a jerk. If you cannot take him out with a siege or ranged attack, you have to deal with the fact that if you can't block 4 of his attack, you're going to take 8 of his damage. Ugh. So we may not be messing with him this turn. And the orcs will leave you alone as long as you don't move next to them. You can move next to them, like I could move here and then I could move away from the orcs. But if I moved adjacent to the orcs in this fashion, they would attack me. So based on what's left in my hand, I don't have any stored mana on my card because this is the first turn. I've already used a mana from the source. And I don't want to waste a whole bunch of move cards that have other benefits on them. I'm not going to be using an attack card this turn, so that's going to be going back into my hand. So I'm looking at, so I'll put this back over here and put it face down. So I'm looking at this move card. I'm looking at improvisation, which allows you to discard a card and get some movement, but it would only give me 3 movement. This would give me 2 movement, and this card would give me 2 movement. Ideally, if I could, I would want to end up in this glade because that would allow me to get a free gold mana token my next turn. But I don't think that it's going to be worth it for me to do it because I would have to discard a card in order to do that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep these cards for now. I'm going to spend this card to move 2, and I'm going to move here, and that's going to give me some options next turn. Next turn I can move into the village, I could move into the healing glade, or maybe I even want to flip over unless a tile's already been flipped over, I can flip over a tile here. Tovok is going to be coming up behind me, and I kind of just blocked him from being able to get to the village or the glade easily. He's going to have to take a little bit longer route if he wants to get to the village. Although he could still get to the glade. So we'll see what Tovok does. But I'm going to call the end of my turn, so I only use 2 cards. This die, the mana die that I used, gets rolled and put back in. And these get discarded. And then I draw back up to 5 cards for Arithia. And now it's Tovok's turn. So Tovok is coming out of the portal. And I know that he has some move cards because I just drew them. So Tovok has some similar cards. This is an attack card. Here's some move, here's some move, here's some influence. which he wouldn't be able to use unless he could find a way to get to the village. And I think what Tovok is going to do is similar to what Arithia did. I think he's going to take this blue move card. He's going to play the mana die on it. He's going to move here for 2, and then he's going to spend 2 to explore. So he's going to flip over a tile. I will make sure that it is properly arranged, and he happens to be right next to a village. So there's a village, there's a white crystal mine. If you end your turn on a crystal mine, then you get whatever color crystal it is to store on your card. And there is also a keep. So the keep is going to get a token on it, but I will make a mess and then draw at random. And that stays face down until someone is adjacent to it, unless it's at night. During the daytime, if someone gets to be adjacent to the keep, then it gets flipped over and you could see who's guarding it. If it's nighttime, this does not get flipped over at all until someone actually moves into the keep. So now Tovok could use this move card without any further mana to move into the village if he wanted to. And he's got some influence, but he doesn't have enough influence to recruit any of the units that are available on offer, because he doesn't have any mana in order to make this an influence 4. He only has an influence of 2, and his reputation is 0, so he wouldn't be able to add his reputation to this in order to make his influence a 3, which would let him recruit the herbalists. The only thing that he would have the option to do would be to play, say, the influence card, and then one of these cards turn sideways as a +1. But that's not necessarily the best move. I'm hesitant to play cards sideways unless it's really necessary. So I think that he's going to end his move in the village, and maybe next time be in a better position to influence and get maybe a unit under his command. So this dice will get re-rolled. Look at that, 3 gold sitting in the source. These 2 will get discarded because they were used. And he draws back up to 5 cards. So now both Arithia and Tovok have taken their turns, and we see the beginnings of what this map is going to look like. And now is when the dummy player comes into play. This is Goldix, and he's our dummy player. I'm just moving him into frame. I'm not going to leave him here, but the way the dummy player works is he always turns over 3 cards. 1, 2, 3. So it's the equivalent of him always playing 3 cards each turn. Then you look at the last card that flipped over, and if it matches one of the crystals that's in his storage area, you flip over that many more cards. So if this had been a green, I would have flipped over 2 more cards. And then that way, he may go through his deck at a faster pace. So you have to pay attention to how quickly the dummy player is going through his deck. Because once he gets to the end of his deck, or one of the other players gets to the bottom of their deck, they can declare end of round, and there'll be 1 more turn for everybody, and then the round is over. And you don't want to be stuck with a bunch of cards in your deck that you didn't even get to use. So let's put Goldix back where he belongs, which is not in the middle of my map. And that's how the first series of turns would work. And that's it for this video, the second video in our series on Mage Knight. For the next video, I'm probably going to skip ahead some, and we'll show combat, and we'll show what the end of the round looks like. Thanks for visiting the Dragon Table. I will see you next time.